Rem was happily seated in the back of a dragon carriage with Subaru, although Subaru wasn't excited at all. In fact, he was terrified, unknowing of what was to await for him when they arrived in Laguniga. The trip to Laguniga would take 2 days, and they were prepared. First, by taking measures to leave on a Thursday, arrive on Saturday, and stay the weekend and leave on Monday. To do this, they contacted their bosses and asked for leave, and were granted it easily. Well, it took some persuasion for Subaru's boss, but it all worked out in the end. Now here they were on the road to visit the Roswell mansion 2 days away from Subaru's worst nightmare. 2 days. Maybe he could think of a way to tell Rem, but he was too cowardly to do it. Every time he thinks of just breaking it to her, he always thinks of her crying, running away from him. That was something that would break his heart and destroy him. It was inevitable. The cold, hard truth of what had to be done was clear as day. Rem had to see for herself. Subaru would accept whatever punishment Rem had to give him when she finds out, but that didn't mean he would look forward to it. He savored every moment he had left with Rem. When Rem slept, he would stroke her hair, silently asking her to forgive him when the time came. Rem never heard those words. By the time they actually arrived at the Laguniga border, it would only take 5 more hours until they arrived at the Roswell mansion. Subaru was starting to feel restless, split between spending time thinking about Rem's smile, or what he'll do when they arrived. He didn't show it though. Subaru kept a calm composure, agreeing with Rem when she got excited the closer they got to the mansion. 2 more hours. We're almost there, Subaru. Rem was on her knees, on top of her seat, bouncing up and down in excitement, and looking out of the flap on the side in the carriage's tarp. I can see the main city's time tower. The city was a marker. Once they entered city limits, it would take 10 minutes to reach the village, and then 5 more minutes to reach the mansion. Subaru didn't say anything, and Rem, in her excitement, didn't notice. 10 minutes till city limits. Subaru was still calm, unsure at just how much longer he could fake it. Rem was still looking outside, still bouncing, still happy. They had finally entered the city limits, and Subaru was taking deep breaths, trying to control his heartbeat. Subaru looked outside to take in some fresh air. Everything in the city was normal. Demi-humans and humans were bustling around, merchants were selling their product. Everything was in its place. Subaru even saw the one merchant that he met when he was first transported to this world, the one he dubbed as Mr. Save Point Guy. The city's normal appearance gave Subaru a false sense of hope that the mansion and villagers were okay too. All his hopes were crushed when they reached the village. Burned building in ashes, that was all that remained at the village. Burnt, curved swords littered the ground. Subaru knew that they belonged to the witch's cult. He had seen them up close one too many times. Scattered among the ashes and rubble were long objects that looked foreign to Subaru. With horror, Subaru realized that they were bones. Subaru never had time to take in more of the scene. He had enough. Subaru retreated back into the carriage and poked his head out. Rem was speechless. Her eyes were filled with horror and familiarity. She was reminded of what had happened to her own hometown. She couldn't forget the massacre, the fire, and the fact that Rem's horn was removed. "Big sister!" Rem shouted out for her sister. Jumping out of the carriage, Rem began to run in the direction of the mansion. "Rem, no!" It was too late. She was already at a full sprint. "Damn it, drive faster!" The driver of the carriage whipped the reins, sending the dragon into a full sprint as well. Within a minute, the dragon caught up to Rem, who was still running. Subaru opened up the tarp in the back, begging Rem to calm down. "Rem, please!" Before Subaru could say more, Rem summoned her demon powers. Conjuring her horn, which glowed brightly, Rem took off, leaving the dragon in the dust. When the dragon came to the front gate of the mansion, Subaru saw the burnt foundation of the mansion. Broken wooden pillars jutted from the ground. The only thing giving any idea that something great once stood there. The only thing that was burnt down was the mansion. The garden was still standing. Its hedges were unkempt, the fountain was untouched but dry, and the grass was still a bright green. What stood out the most was the curved, blood-stained sword planted deeply into the soil just in front of the mansion. Tied to the sword, a purple ribbon flowed in the light breeze. Rem had fallen to her knees when she saw the burnt remains of the house, and the sword that jutted from the ground, like a marker of some sort. Her horn was gone, but a lost look had taken over her eyes that were once filled with fear. Subaru wanted to approach Rem, but was too scared to do so. He saw the back of Rem, her body shaking, shoulders hunched, and her arms at her waist. Rem was crying. That was enough for Subaru to rush to Rem. "Rem, you knew, didn't you?" Subaru stopped 5 feet away from Rem. Rem said her words almost in a whisper, but Subaru heard them loud and clear. Now that Rem saw the burnt remains, the curved swords, her sister's ribbon, and Subaru's weird request to leave the country, she was certain Subaru knew something she didn't. When Subaru didn't answer, she got up from her knees to face Subaru, who had his head down, eyes unseen. "Answer me, Natsuki!" Rem's loud voice brought Subaru's head back up. Tears flowed down his cheeks. He was shocked to hear Rem call him by his last name. He knew that this meant that Rem no longer saw him as a friend. I wanted to tell you, Rem. I couldn't, not when you were so happy. Who cares if I'm happy? I do care, Rem. You may not see it now, but I always cared. I tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and tried, but nothing I did worked. Every word hurt. Every word affected him. Subaru no longer had control over himself. He was lost in his emotions that he had pent up since Valentine's Day. You don't know, Rem. You don't know how much pain I've seen, how much blood I've seen, how many times I've seen you. Pain took over his heart. Not emotional, but physical. The witch was playing with his heart, fondling it between her hands like an artist with clay. Subaru clutched his heart, trying to endure the pain. Subaru heard Rem's footsteps come closer. Looking up, he only saw hatred in her eyes. A tiny red glow shone in the center of her eyes. Subaru feared what Rem would do to him when she spoke. You reek of the witch. Rem, please, I tried. Rem narrowed her eyes and spoke in a voice full of malice. Well, you didn't try hard enough. Rem cocked her arm back. Next thing Subaru knew, his world was bathed in darkness. When Subaru woke up, his vision was blurry. A burning pain was coming from his head. Reaching up, Subaru quickly recoiled when he felt a large bump that sent pain throughout his head. Rem is sorry about the bump. I forgot how fragile humans were. Rem's voice came from his right. Subaru turned to her voice. Rem was sitting on the grass, so they are outside. Subaru got up and quickly realized they never moved from where they were before. The sword was still sunk into the dirt, but the ribbon was gone. The sky was getting dark. How long was he out? At once, Subaru realized what a dire situation he was in. Rem currently thought he was working with the witch. There was no sign of help for miles, and nothing was around that he could use to protect himself with. I still love you, Subaru. Subaru looked back at Rem. She didn't have a look that said sorry, though. Rem didn't choose to fall in love with Subaru. Subaru seduced Rem to gain her trust. You may not be the Subaru that I love, but somewhere in you, there is. Don't be stupid, Rem. Which is why I cannot kill you. Rem simply cannot do it. That's why I will keep you alive and use you to find more information on the whereabouts of the witch's cult. Subaru had a flashback to the time in a loop that seemed an eternity ago, where he went through a similar thing. He was hurt. Rem had him pinned, and now he was going to be interrogated in his association with the witch's cult. Rem pursed her lips and looked at Subaru with a serious look. Where is the witch cult's hideout? One simple question, and Subaru had the one simple answer. I don't know. Please don't lie, Subaru. It hurts Rem when you lie. You've lied to Rem for quite some time now. Rem looked towards the turned over dragon carriage at the front gate. She didn't hurt the dragon or the man, just scared them off. Subaru was silent. Rem noticed his time and leaned over Subaru. Looking him in the eyes, she saw his fear. Subaru was scared. Scared of me. She began to stroke his hair. Subaru has nothing to fear. I will protect you. This sadistic Rem was something Subaru thought could never exist. She was bloodthirsty, yet gentle. It disturbed him. The mind of Rem must have finally snapped when her world that was hanging by a thread came crashing down. Her first love was a follower of the witch, and she was madly attracted to him. Her sister, her best friend since birth, was dead, killed by the same people who ruined both of their lives. Why did Subaru choose not to tell Rem? Subaru gulped before answering. Because you'll die. The witch grasped his heart again, causing pain to circulate throughout him. Die. Subaru underestimates Rem. I will be alright. Rem gives him a smile. Subaru isn't fooled by it. Rem sees that Subaru will not tell and devises a plan that will test whether or not he does know the location. What if Rem were to get help by others? There are many people in kingdoms willing to destroy the cult, for they cause a nuisance to trading routes. Subaru was interested. Just as long as Rem wasn't part of the fight, he would be happy. I'm sure that we will gather enough people to take out a small group. All you have to do is tell me where they're at. Rem finishes with a smile. Well, Will Rem participate in the fight? What would you like me to do? Rem shows a curious face. Not risk your life and stay out of the fight. Please. Promise me, Rem. Promise me you won't fight. This brings a very slight blush to Rem's cheeks. Maybe he did like her, or maybe it was another one of his tricks. Rem promises. Rem stuck out one of her pinkies and wrapped it around Subaru's, who began to lift his. Subaru still wasn't sure he wanted to tell Rem, but he forced himself. East of the village, there's a cave. That's where you'll find the cult. Subaru closes his eyes. He was giving information he really didn't want her to know. Rem stood up as soon as he finished. Subaru looked up at Rem. Please wait here for Rem. I will be back. Rem flashes a true smile at Subaru. Subaru frantically scrambled to get up. No, wait, Rem, where are you going? Rem took out her pink ribbon from her hair and replaced it with Rem's purple ribbon, which Rem took from her pocket. Rem ties it in place expertly from years of practice. I'm going to avenge Big Sister. No, please Rem, there's too many. There are things you don't know. Subaru began to walk towards Rem, but was pushed back by Rem's powerful arm and fell on his butt. Thank you, Subaru, but Rem knows enough. Please wait for me. Rem turned around towards the forest. You promised to stay out of the fight. Rem did promise, but Big Sister is more important. Rem gave Subaru one last loving smile before summoning her Oni form and running into the forest. No, Rem, come back! Please don't do this alone. You promised, Rem! Subaru ran after Rem, but knew he would never keep up with her. Head throbbing, Subaru had to stop in a nearby tree to stop himself from collapsing. When he regained his ability to run, Subaru began to yell for Rem, hoping she would hear his words and come back. Rem, please Rem, don't go alone. Don't leave me, Rem. Subaru's voice began to die down as his head began to hurt. Up ahead, Subaru saw a break in the trees and instantly forgot about the pain his head was causing. Please, don't be too late. Subaru entered the mouth of the cave. The cool air gave him goosebumps, hair standing on ends. Subaru was sure he was going to die here. If that was the case, so be it. Subaru went in further. The cave was full of winding hallways and split paths, each with their own dead end, meaning there was no way of getting totally lost. Just trial and error. Finally, Subaru came to a large opening that he recognized as the one he was held prisoner in. He quickly realized that he wasn't alone. 10 hooded figures were huddled around a small figure on the floor. Please. Upon hearing footsteps enter the chamber, the hooded figures turned to meet the gaze of Subaru. Their faces hidden in shadows, studied Subaru for a few seconds until Subaru took a step towards them. That was when they crouched low and took off for the exit. So fast they were just a blur. With the cult members gone, Subaru saw the figure on the floor. Rem. Rem was on her belly, a pool of blood surrounded her head. Subaru turned her over in an attempt to try and revive her, but his attempt would have been worthless because Rem was still breathing. Her chest falling up and down in a smooth rhythm told Subaru she was still alive and well. Her face was covered in blood, most likely her own since she was still bleeding from her head. Subaru followed the blood to its source and found out it was coming from her horn. Or more accurately, where her horn should have been. A bloody stump was in place of Rem's horn. Her symbol of being an Oni was gone. Her secret weapon was now useless. A few feet away, Subaru saw her horn, lying on the ground with a faint glow emitting from it. It was absolute proof that Rem had lost her horn forever. Groaning came from Rem as she slowly regained consciousness. Subaru used his shirt to wipe her face clean of blood, to which Rem reacted with squeezing her face like a child. When he was done, Rem opened her eyes. Rem. Subaru gave her a supportive smile. Subaru, I'm sorry. Rem looked away ashamed. She didn't expect Subaru to ever forgive her for her monstrous actions to him, so she definitely didn't expect him to be smiling at her. It made no sense to Subaru that Rem blamed herself for her actions. If anything, Subaru should be apologizing. He lied to her and drove her to this state because of his selfishness to get Rem to run with him. He might as well have been the one to cut her horn off. Subaru helped Rem to her feet. She wasn't showing it, but Subaru could tell her head was hurting. Subaru still wasn't sure if Rem already knew of her horn, so he began to ask. Rem, I know, Subaru. Rem looked down. I know. I'm just happy you're safe, Rem. Now that you're safe, I wanted to apologize for driving you over the edge. I should have told you before about Ram instead of letting it all come crashing down on you all at once. The memory is still stung, but Rem knew what she wanted to say next. Subaru, Rem stopped mid-sentence. Subaru looked at Rem with a puzzled look. Rem? That was when Subaru looked down to see a foot of a curved sword protruding from her abdomen. Rem! Behind Rem stood a member of the cult, sword in hand and half of it buried into Rem's back. Subaru was in shock, unknowing of what to do. The cult member removed the sword, looked at Subaru and vanished. Subaru caught a falling Rem before she hit the ground. Rem! 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 No! Please answer me! In reply to Subaru's calls, Rem only coughed up blood. Subaru rested against a tree, overlooking the cliffside. A freshly buried grave located right beside him. Subaru buried Rem with her horn so she could have it among the stars. Carved into the tree that Subaru buried Rem under were the words, Rem, the last Oni. I'll see you soon, Rem. Subaru said these words as he got up and walked to the cliffside, the same one he took to escape Ram many leaps ago. Only this time, he wasn't scared at first to do it. Subaru knew what he must do. Save Rem. That was his objective. With that, Subaru jumped to the jagged rocks below.